G'day. Just sitting here with a fine glass of Australian white. My wife and I have just shared a gourmet pizza, and all's well with the world. Now, at some stage I'll tell you how the bike ride went. I've got to confess that I'm a hen, not a pig. And if you want to know the story about hens and pigs, well, we'll tell you sometime, but can I say I'm not proud? What I'm here to do is answer the question, when does a prostitute get paid? And there's only one time they get paid, and I don't have any personal experience. I've been told this, so please accept that I don't personally know. I'm in domestic prostitution, which means I'm married, and I've been paying for 43 years. When it comes to commercial prostitution, a prostitute gets paid before the act. And why is that? Well, it's very simple. It's because that's when the need is greatest. If they got paid afterwards, the guy could say, oh, you weren't very good, you weren't enthusiastic, you didn't last very long, and find reasons not to pay. But of course, when they want it, they're prepared to pay. They want the pain relieved. So what's the reason I've asked this question? Well, it's very simple. When will you get people to conform with the rules, the things that you have in your practice? For instance, a lot of dentists say to me there's no point in treating dental phobics because they only want the pain fixed and you never see them again. I take a contrary view. I believe that when you get a dental phobic in, if they haven't had work done for years, then you can probably take the price of a small car out of their mouth. But you've got to remember when a prostitute gets paid, you've got to train your team to ask the right questions. So somebody rings up and your DA, your receptionist, realises that they're a phobic. They've got pain. So there's a question you should ask. It's something along these lines. Now look, you tell me you haven't seen a dentist in a few years. That means that you may not only require the pain stopped, there may be some major work to be done. So tell me, do you only want the pain stopped, or are you happy to have the rest of the work that's necessary done? Most times, if they don't want to do any more, they'll say, oh no, just want the pain stopped. In which case, your receptionist should refer them to a competitor whom you dislike, thereby increasing the coals of fire upon their head and making you feel much better about things generally. If, however, they agree and say, oh no, well, you know, if there's more work to be done, I'll have it done, you know you've got them. Now, it's an important question to ask at any time, because you see, when people are hurting, when they want the pain fixed, or when they want to feel the pleasure, they're prepared to do what's necessary to ensure they get that pain or pleasure. So, review what you do when people ring in for appointments. In fact, the harder you make it to get, the harder it is to get an appointment with you, the more they'll appreciate it. The more hurdles you give them to jump, the more they'll appreciate it. That's why your receptionist should never find it easy to make an appointment. That's why your receptionist should say, are mornings or afternoons more convenient? And when they say mornings, say, oh golly, I've only got an afternoon here. Of course, she or he should also be uttering reassuring phrases, little third-party testimonials like, oh, Dr. Bloggs is so good, it's so hard to find a space. Oh, dear me, so many people want to see him. These third-party testimonials are important. Now, the problem for you is your mother, isn't it? Because you see, your mother told you not to boast, not to show off. You came home from school one day and said, I topped the class in math today. And she said, don't show off, darling, that's nice, but don't show off. The other day you said, I'm very fast at running. I can beat everybody running around the block. She said, that's good, darling, but don't boast. So by the time we get qualified professionally, we find it hard to tell people we're good, don't we? And you've got to tell your team members that we want to raise the bar. We want to make sure that the people we get are the ones that are qualified to see us. We want to make sure that people who get to see us appreciate that they're seeing one of the most brilliant dentists on the face of the planet. Now that raises another problem, doesn't it? You've got to overcome that reluctance to pop your own cork, to blow your own horn. Really what you've got to do is sit with your team and talk about reasons why you are good. And I don't mean you personally, I mean you as a practice. What are the 5 or 3 reasons that make you excellent at what you do? And you know, every dentist and every practice can do that. But you've got to take the time to do it. It may well be that your receptionist is able to say, look, she or he's a fantastic dentist. Everybody that comes and sees him or her always say, gee, they did a great job. Gee, I didn't feel a thing. Gee, I look tremendous. It's just making sure you establish the system. And a system is very important. The system for getting these things out is to make sure that your team members know what to say. And here's the problem. Saying what they should say, unless they get taught, is not going to happen. You know, the number 1 fear of most people is speaking in public. The number 2 fear is death. Which only goes to show that most people would rather die than speak in public. So, what you've got to do is help them. Otherwise they'll just wing it and say the easiest things. You've got to teach them. And one of the systems to teach them is having a script. The script tells people what to say. For example, how do you handle the question, how much is it for a crown? Now, I'll bet your team members get rung and asked that many times. And I'll bet if I phantom phone them, they're going to give fudgy answers. They're either going to tell them or they're going to say, well, it depends. We've taught them that. When in fact there's some great answers to what they should do, what they should say. There's one called the lemon look answer. That's an answer that you've got to imagine you've sucked 6 lemons and your mouth's so puckered up that when they ask you that question you look at them and you say, is cheap important to you? Oh, what a great question. Perhaps one day we can talk about that script. Perhaps one day we ought to talk about the script that every one of your receptionists should know. The script for the 3 most important questions they must always ask when a new client rings in for an appointment. And I'll bet you that your team aren't answering those questions. But I don't want to waste your time talking about it. I just wanted to make the point that a prostitute gets paid when the need is greatest. So, when you're talking to people, when your team are talking to people, they've got to lay down the rules when the need is greatest. You do that, the hearts and minds will follow. Enough of my ruminations. Cheers. Yes, a piquant little white. Not as good as the Aussie Reds, but not real bad.